Educational Communications and this station present Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman. On this series, we explore the effects of human influence on the Earth's ecosystems and discuss solutions to environmental problems which affect the quality of life on this planet. Environmental Directions gives you the kind of information you need to help you participate in decisions impacting your community, the nation, and the world. Now, here's your host, Nancy Pearlman.
Hello. My guest is Pragati Pascale. She is the editor for Listen to Nature, Living in Harmony with the Earth, a new book by Sri Chinmoy, and she serves as a senior outreach coordinator for UN Energy. She has been the former strategic communications consultant and writer at the United Nations, including Chief Development Section, Strategic Communications Division at the United Nations, and also spokesperson for Rio Plus 20. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Nancy. Nice to be here with you.
You have worked on sustainable development and climate summits, but you also personally are involved in spirituality. How do you connect the political summits and programs and policies by governments with the spiritual aspects of caring and loving the earth?
Well, that's a very deep question, and that goes to the heart of why I was inspired to put this book together. And I want to clarify that I'm not speaking on behalf of the United Nations here. These are my personal views. But as you mentioned, I worked for over 25 years on environment and sustainable development issues, many conferences and summits. You see incremental change. You see commitments made by governments, but, will they follow through? At the same time, you read all these dire reports coming out of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and on biodiversity. You just ask yourself, is there any hope? At the same time, I've studied meditation and spirituality with Sri Chinmoy for also many years. He offered non-denominational peace meditations at the United Nations for over 30 years at the invitation of Secretary General U Thant, who started in 1970, feeling that we need to bring peace into the political arena as the foundation of action. So over the years, he was asked a number of questions about the environment, and his answers were always very hopeful. They gave me hope, personally. I felt that it could be a contribution to publish his words.
I thoroughly enjoyed reading this very small, delightful book. You can just pick it up and read a page or two at a time. One page, for example, has some interesting thoughts. If peace is not in nature's beauty, then where is it? Where? Or, Mother Earth, your beauty is unimaginable. You are far beyond the appreciation of my heart and my life. And my heart adores the simplicity, beauty of Mother Earth. These are very inspiring thoughts. How did you choose from his many, many talks and writings the various beautiful comments that he made caring about the earth?
Well, I'm glad that you found them inspiring. Yes, it was quite a journey to select the writings because he's written over 1,600 books and thousands of poems. We chose the ones that we felt kind of gave his core messages about nature and the environment. Part of that is how much we can receive from nature, how much peace, how much tranquility, how much healing we can receive from being in nature. It really seems like this is an important message now, and so many people are discovering this with COVID, and people are spending more time outdoors and really seeking peace from nature.
Your book has a foreword by my hero, Jane Goodall, a primatologist, a United Nations Peace Ambassador, an anthropologist, someone who cares deeply about taking care of all the animals and plants and ecosystems on our planet. You talk about how she speaks tirelessly about the power of hope in the heart, and even as she urges each of us to action, she makes the point that change comes from within. And this is a continuous theme that we have to take action, as Sri Chinmoy said, that we must heal the earth and we have to stop those destructive actions.
Yes, Jane Goodall is one of my heroes too, and I was fortunate to get to know her through my UN work. I was fortunate to be able to introduce introduce her to Sri Chinmoy, and they had a wonderful meeting together in 2003, and he honored her. They have many similarities in what they feel is the root cause of our destruction of the environment, that it's a deeper spiritual connection with nature is what is needed, and that we need to live more in the heart, less in the mind. She was very kind to offer a forward for Listen to Nature. Very grateful to her.
Sri Chinmoy lived to be about 76 years old, died in 2007, but he expressed so much of Indian spirituality through his writings and talks. But there are so many other spiritual people, whether or not it's Thich Nhat Hanh, who talks about greater mindfulness and a love for the earth, the Dalai Lama, who attributes the overexploitation of our natural resources to ignorance and greed and lack of respect for life on earth, and the list can go on. Have these people with the spiritual aspects of caring about the earth gotten involved in the political aspects? Because the various governments have to take action if we're going to solve this climate change problem, if we're going to stop the exploitation and destruction. We have to have regulations and rules to control the businesses and the corporate world that is so very involved in exploiting the resources on the planet.
Yes, a number of spiritual leaders have been speaking and writing about environmental issues. It's really a wonderful thing. We definitely need political action, but I think the spiritual leaders can offer the inspiration and a kind of foundation for the kind of change that we need to see happen in the world. Jane Goodall told a story about a CEO in Singapore who said that for him, the tipping point in his decision to green his company's operations was his 10-year-old daughter coming home from school one day and asking, "Is it true, Daddy? Are you hurting the planet?" And it was just one tiny example of how when our hearts are touched and their attitudes illumined, leaders make better policy decisions. So there is an important role for the voice of spiritual leaders in the political arena. Not that they're going to get involved in politics, but politicians are people too. They're looking for spiritual wisdom.
The book that you wrote, Listen to Nature, Living in Harmony with the Earth, has many different thoughts. Could you share a few with us? Because right now, I am finding that so many people are refusing to accept science, and yet there is no real division between spirituality and science. And as Sri Chinmoy said, science is desperately searching for the cosmic key. Nature already has it. We need both.
Yes, this is definitely true. There's an important role for science and technology, obviously, in our world, but we need to also bring forward our hearts and balance that intellectual capacity with developing our inner capacities. I think in terms of the messages of the book, one quotation that for me summarizes the message: each individual has a special role to play in the protection of our small planet. It is the illumination of the individual mind and spirit that will precede the awakening of a new collective awareness. The change in individual attitudes will be the precursor of a change in institutional policies, and the result will be a greater respect and love for our planet Earth. So to me, that kind of summarizes how the role of the individual is very crucial as a foundation for collective change. It may sound quite simplistic, especially if you're an activist or working in politics, and sometimes even to me it sounds simplistic when you're engrossed in UN work. But meditation is one of the most powerful tools we have to transform our consciousness and create change. And at the same time, each of us also needs to take positive action within our own area of influence in our communities. And Sri Chinmoy said, here's another quote, "Every self-giving effort of every human being is needed to change the fate of this world." He gave a very powerful message of hope. The higher power in the world would not allow this world to be destroyed.
We talked about how science and spirituality are really connected. In your book, you have Sri Chinmoy saying, "Science says I eternally am. Also, science and spirituality complement each other. Science discovers the many in the one. Spirituality reveals the one in the many.
Yes, the thoughts about science are very interesting, and they do show the complementarity of science and spirituality. We need science, but also science has its limitations. We also need the deeper part of ourselves that we find in spirituality. Here's a quote about science. Science and spirituality must be united. They need each other. Without the one, the other is incomplete, almost meaningless. Together, they are not only supremely complete, but also divinely meaningful.
I am so fearful of the destruction that is going on and wondering whether or not it is too late. You were active with Glasgow COPE, which was a climate change summit recently held in Scotland. We both attended the 1992 Rio Summit, the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. International meetings are being held all the time. What is happening? What is coming out of it when you don't have all the countries in the world agreeing to take action on things like climate change?
Yes, it can be very discouraging to watch the political process, both domestically and globally, the lack of agreement and the lack of action. Sri Chinmoy himself acknowledged that government leaders are not doing enough, all talk and no action. We not only can press forward as advocates and as activists, but we can also try to help this change in consciousness that needs to happen at the root. We have to go to the root of the problem, which is the human being and our drive for supremacy and our greed and our use of the earth's resources in inappropriate, destructive ways. So we need to not only change our policies, but also to change ourselves.
Can you share with us some other insights that you have presented in your charming book, Listen to Nature?
Sri Chinmoy had a concept of peace, which is reaffirmed in Indian philosophy, that peace includes harmony with nature. This is a beautiful quote. Lasting peace must begin within the depths of the individual, and from there spread in ever-widening circles as a dynamic force for world change.
Both of us live in large cities. You're in New York, I'm in Los Angeles, and yet I must continuously get myself outdoors, even if it is just to see the yards of the homes, something other than the buildings. But I also want to get to the natural areas, to the mountains, deserts. One of the quotes here says, "When life is really a question, the answer can be found in the natural beauty of Mother Earth." The whole connectedness to nature is so important for us as human beings, and we must continue to have that if we are going to recognize how all the plants and animals are critical on this planet to help us as human beings survive.
Absolutely. So many people are seeking answers in nature and finding answers. Here's another quote. "It is from nature that we get all good things, beauty, tranquility, humility, simplicity, and many other positive qualities. Nature helps us to regain our spontaneity. Like this, nature helps us in millions of ways to become good citizens of the world. That is why we must respect and adore nature. And also, nature's beauty teaches optimism to the aspiring heart."
Thank you so very much for gathering together some of these very thoughtful, provocative, enjoyable ideas that have been presented in such a short, comforting way. I have enjoyed picking up the book and reading these few poems and these few thoughts on a regular basis. It's totally enjoyable. I appreciate your putting them together in your book, Listen to Nature, Living in Harmony with the Earth, Sri Chinmoy. Thank you so very much for being my guest.
Thank you so much for having me, Nancy, and thank you for helping us to share these very positive thoughts with everyone.
You're welcome. I have been speaking with Pragati Pascale, who is a communications specialist and writer and editor of Listen to Nature and works as the Senior Outreach Coordinator for UN Energy. I'm Nancy Perlman. Thank you very much for joining us, and do tune in again next week.
If you would like free information about these environmental issues, go to www.ecoprojects.org or call 310-559-9160. Environmental Directions with your host, Nancy Pearlman, is a community affairs program of the nonprofit organization Educational Communications and this station.